Welcome back. Trade between African countries is not always easy. South Africa has faced friction over agricultural trade in recent years from both Namibia and Botswana. With a new administration in place now in Botswana, agricultural economist Wandile Sihlobo believes now is the right time for the countries under the South African Customs Union to look at restarting and improving the agricultural trade relationships. We're joined now by Wandile to discuss this and what's possible and how South Africa can improve its agricultural relationships. A very good evening to you, Wandile. Let's just chat a little bit about this. What causes this friction between South Africa's agricultural trade relations with some of our neighboring countries?
Masa, I think the best starting point is to paint a picture for the South Africans about how interlinked are we to the region. So as the agricultural sector in this country, we export roughly about $13 billion worth of products each year. If you look at that and say, where do these products go to? They go to a range of countries, but about 40% of our agricultural exports go to the African continent. And in that 40% that is in the African continent, 90 cents in every dollar that we export is within the SADC region. And in that SADC, you find that the likes of Botswana, Namibia, and the others are our biggest markets that are there. And over time, they have started thinking about restarting their own domestic agricultural sector, which is a good thing because it means then that regionally we can have more agricultural production. But how they go about doing that is what has been perhaps maybe a policy mistake by many of the previous administrations, certainly in Botswana and in Namibia, which is the story of saying they want to block certain products from South Africa so that they can create space for their domestic farmers. And I think that both violates the spirit of SACU, but also it puts consumers in those regions under immense pressure when they deal with higher food prices. That's the background in all of this, very briefly.
And also, you wrote an article recently where you were speaking about this in terms of what you're saying now is the how it's done as well, not necessarily that it's being done, because one can understand those countries wanting to boost and promote their own products as well before other countries. But imposing this complete ban, you're saying that's not the way to go about it. In a case like Botswana, you have said that they would benefit from South Africa's technologies to improve its own agriculture. Would you then say, Wandile, that it's a case sometimes of cutting your nose to spite your face?
I think how we should go about it, Masai, is this. Firstly, it's important that the countries in the region, they do whatever they can to improve their domestic production. That's for partially making sure that they have some form of production for food security, but also ensuring that agriculture does create job creation and other vibrancy in their countries. There's always also this unspoken sentiment that South Africa plays a big brother in the region. You don't want to appear in that way. And I think that what we should be doing now, we should be saying, look, in Botswana, you want to increase your production. In Namibia, you want to increase your production. Therefore, how do we go about doing that? And they tell us what products they want to prioritize. And therefore, not go about completely banning the products, but rather, if it's well communicated, then that's a signal to the market. Even the South Africans can be able to plan properly. Because what it leads to now at the moment is that we are all under the SACU Customs Union. There are clear rules that guide us that we can't just shut down our borders. But also, if it's done overnight, it creates the sentiment where some among us in South Africa, they will feel that they've been done badly by Botswana. Likewise, in Botswana, Namibia, there could be that feeling. But I think we can be able to coordinate this and think about regional agricultural value chains. And I think, Masa, the point you are making is very important, because if you think about the livestock industry, in South Africa, we import a lot of vaccines from Botswana. Likewise, we do a lot of research in South Africa for a range of commodities. Take, for example, the citrus industry. where we take some of the technologies and know-how and inputs out of South Africa and send to the neighboring countries so that they can boost their agricultural production. I think we need that form of a coordinated way. And I think President Duma Boko in Botswana, and certainly hoping that the Namibian colleagues also feel that way so that we can begin thinking about the regional agricultural value chains than the friction that we have been seeing over the past few years.
Yeah, and you also mentioned, this perception as well of South Africa playing this kind of big brother role in the region as well, and not wanting to seem to impose itself as well when it comes to such negotiations and talks. How has South Africa responded to these bans? Have there been any slight counter bans or insinuation of that to come?
I think, Masa, I may seem here as if I'm biased, but I don't believe that South Africa has been antagonistic in the region. Of course, as a large country in mass size and in size of the economy, you always have to be thoughtful about the neighbors. And I think that's what South Africa has done, because although there were bans placed overnight, if you were an uncaring South African policymaker, you could have decided to retaliate. But South Africa did not do that. We had to think about what's the best ways of engaging some of the neighboring countries so that we think from the regional perspective. So while there may be a sentiment, which certainly is there, one feels it informally in various conversations, I do think that that needs to go away. We all have to say, what can South Africa do well? What can Botswana do well? What Namibia does well? And all of the other countries. Then we begin strengthening the cooperation in that way, because ultimately, we ought to boost food security in our region and think about how do we boost our exports to other parts of the world, not spending a lot of time looking and fighting against each other in the region. And I think South Africa so far has behaved fairly well on that, because there has not been any antagonistic way towards our neighboring countries. We are seeking friendship and cooperation.
Should that not happen, should Namibia and Botswana not change these bans that they did impose as well, you propose that South Africa look at other regions and export to other markets. Which other places in the world would you say that South Africa would have a very good fighting chance to become a very good exporter for those countries or regions?
2 quick points here, Masa. One, I am very optimistic that Botswana lowers the barriers that are there and Namibia's follow suit, because today, if you think about the vegetable price inflation in Botswana, it's over 13%. In South Africa, it's less than 3%. So there's a huge pain against Botswana people because of these bans. But also we have to think about a better way of handling this. And I hope that Namibia does the same. Second point, I do think that we ought to look into the world and say, can we as a region explore opportunities for exports in the BRICS countries? Botswana does well in livestock, can tag along South Africa and explore those opportunities in the BRICS region. Beyond that, we need to continue to intensify our efforts broadly in the Middle East as well as in broader Asia, while at the same time maintaining the existing relationships in the EU, in the Americas, and the other region, because we have to strengthen regional agricultural value chain and think about how do we participate in the world collectively.
Wandile, thank you so much for your time and just sharing those insights with us.